Well, thank you so much, Joe, for being on the Magic of Cozy's podcast today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So getting right into it, can you tell us about your journey into writing Magical Cozy Mysteries?
Yeah, it was a little bit of an unusual one because it was never my intention really to write magical cozy mysteries. I started my writing journey writing literary short stories and with ghost stories. I love ghosts in my stories. So there's always a little bit of that supernatural atmosphere in them. And then I wrote a few novels, gothic suspense novels, which are quite dark and serious and all the things really that paranormal cozy mysteries are not. And so my journey into writing paranormal cozy mysteries is a little bit of an unusual one because I did everything opposite of what you would expect an author to probably do. I was just starting my writing journey. I think it might have even been back in 2020, and I was like perusing the perusing the pre-made book cover websites and came across this trilogy of book covers that I just fell in love with. And they had this cute little cat on the front and they were all kind of witchy woo-woo, had this cool vibe to them. And I fell in love with the covers. And I'm like, I need those covers. I have no idea what I'm ever going to do with them or if I ever will do anything with them. And so I purchased the covers, continued writing gothic suspense, and burnt out a little bit from it. My stories can be a little bit dark at times, and I put a little bit of myself into them, kind of shadowed in there. And so after writing one of my gothic suspense novels, Unspoken Truths, I found it really hard to get on with the sequel and to go back into that world. And so I needed a change. And I pulled out these covers and I wrote my first paranormal cozy mystery, Hades Haunt, based on the cover of all things, which is ridiculous. But it was the most fun, easy book that I've ever written. Like I just enjoyed and loved every moment of it. It was so freeing because it was so different than what I was used to writing. And now I'm addicted and I've got 2 other covers, but I suspect this series is going to be more than a trilogy. I suspect this is going to be considerably longer because I have so many stories in mind for my lovely characters in Hades Haunt. So
that's so nice to hear. I hope you can find the artist and have them get ready to go with more covers.
Well, I've got all 3 of the covers already. So when I reach out to her, and I always just check that she's still around and everything, because I'm like, I will need the titles tweaked, and I've actually already got the titles for the book. I haven't got the plots, but I've got the titles. So she's already done that for me. And I hope she doesn't go anywhere because the series depends on her. No.
That's so interesting. Yeah. I know as a reader, you develop your own idea of a house or a town based on how the author is describing it. But I do appreciate and I do love a good cover that shows like a little glimpse into the world that the author is trying to create. I absolutely loved your book. I think I picked it up on Book Siren and read it and was like, this is new. This is an author I never heard of. And I really, really liked it. And loved is like the cover for those listening, if you haven't already picked it up, it's like a really haunted looking house with a cat on the front. And when I read the book and they're talking about, being in front of the house and being inside the house, I already have that picture of the house, right? But anyways, that's fascinating. I think you might be our first author that has that story, that has shared that.
It's a weird way of going about things, but I don't know. This is the only story I've ever written where it's been based on the cover. Usually the cover is the last thing I even consider. It was just meant to be. And to be honest, it got my writing mojo back because, it got me out of the burnout and that. And it's my most fun book to have written so far.
Yeah. I mean, when you're inspired, you're inspired. You can't always choose how the inspiration comes to you. So speaking of inspiration, how were you inspired to blend all these themes? what inspired you for the specific elements that you incorporate in your story.
Yeah, well, again, that's kind of far reaching. I have always had a love for witches and ghosts and that kind of supernatural thing. But also, as I was growing up, like in my teens and my 20s, and that, I was really into Wicca, which is, a natural religion, natural spirituality, really, crystals and herbs and all the rest of it. So I've always had that fascination with, yeah, magic and connection to nature and all of that. Absolutely love it. And yeah, and all the kind of woo woo and everything. I am cat crazy. I have 4 cats. And as it happened, when I first found these covers, I did not have a black cat, but a black cat did come into my life, and his name is Hades. And he is pretty similar to the cat in the book. So there was that as well. But I've also had a fascination with the afterlife and the concept of spirits and ghosts and that kind of thing as well. And so it's pretty rare for me to write a story that doesn't have ghosts in it. Normally with my gothic suspense, it's much more serious and a little not horror per se, but moving that direction. Whereas in Hades Haunt, I think it's a lot more fun and quirky. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, quirky for sure. And I do love Hades.
Yay. Thank you. Honestly, Hades is my favorite character in the book too. Like, and I get that feedback a lot. This is probably the only book or story I've written where I actually love every character in it. That's not usually the case, but Hades is definitely my fave.
And Widdershins, I hope I'm pronouncing
Mm.
that right. Is that based on a real town? If it is a made up town, how did you approach building this town and making it into a believable setting?
Yeah, so Widdershins is not really based on a real town. This is the only book I've written that in my mind I wrote for an American audience. I'm in New Zealand, so I had to change my vocab and everything in this book and have my editor really heavily go through and correct me. However, I'm always pulling from places that I've been to or seen, or sometimes even on television and things like that. And setting is usually the first thing that comes to me when I'm creating a world or a story or a plot even. Usually go from setting first. And I did spend a few years in my early teens, excuse me, living in a very small little country town that had old Victorianish houses with what I used to call like witches' turrets. They were strange kind of it just reminded me of the cottage a little bit in Hades Haunt. And of course in small towns you sometimes get some quite eclectic people. Yeah, and everybody knows everybody's business, or at least thinks they do. So it was a little bit of inspired by that, but also I did quite a bit of research online, looked at Massachusetts and Salem and everything. Of course, I tried to pay attention to what trees were, like trees and herbs, and it was a lot to get my brain around because I've never actually been there. It's a place I would love to go to. I've spent very little time in the US. I lived in Canada for several years, but so it's a little bit of everything, but really it's fantasy. It's a made up little world that I actually think, minus the murders, would be pretty cool to live in. Yeah.
Yeah, all of these
Yeah.
cozy towns seem wonderful until a murder
Yeah.
happens. But
Yeah.
isn't that real life? I mean, I'm sure wherever we live, there
Yeah.
have been
Yeah.
similar tragedies, and we still live here, and it's still
Exactly.
safe-ish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
And
I highly encourage you to come to the US, to the Massachusetts area, um,
yeah.
specifically if you're interested, because it is filled all of that witchy, paranormal,
Yeah.
good stuff. I lived on the East Coast, now live in the Southwest. And that has its own ghost stories with the
Yeah.
Wild West. But there's this coziness to the East Coast lore that
Mm.
is really magical in its own way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely on the bucket list for sure. I would love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to aspiring authors who are interested in writing paranormal cozy mysteries?
Yeah, so I think so. I come at this. I'm also a teacher, and I have a podcast for other writers and that. And I think the advice that we all need really is just do it. just write the book, because these things can often sit for far too long as ideas or as inspiration, but never actually make it to the page. And so it does take a certain level of commitment to get the words down. And then, and this sounds so silly, but really the biggest thing is have fun with it. Like, really have fun with it. If you're not enjoying the process, or you're not enjoying, if you don't love your characters, even the bad ones, if you don't love them, if you don't love the setting and that, I think you're taking away a little bit. It comes through in your words, and you're taking it away a little bit from the reader as well. When we're writing like cozy mysteries with that magical slant too, I do think it's important to establish some ground rules within the magical world, so that it's not a free-for-all, that anything can happen and without any rhyme or reason. So I think there needs to be a little bit of world building about what your characters can and cannot do, and what rules they're governed by, and try and be consistent with that throughout. Also, I like to personally try and link everything back to myth or superstition, or something that's actually already established in the real world, so that it just kind of anchors it a little bit more. And yeah, but the biggest thing really is have fun. Listen to your characters too, because when I set out to write Hades' Haunt, I'm not really a plotter, but I spent a bit of time trying to work out what the story was going to be about. And I thought I knew who was going to get murdered and who the murderer was going to be. And that did not happen. They flat out refused. And, if someone doesn't want to murder people, they're not going to murder people. And the characters kind of decided that. So, and I think it was a better story for me to actually just trust my characters to take me in the directions that they needed to go. So, yeah, so there's a bit of that as well. Yeah.
Some great advice. So, switching gears a little bit on the questions, what is your definition of magic?
Well, this is kind of interesting, because I was thinking about this one quite a lot. And of course, there's different types of magic. We go to magic shows and that kind of thing. If I'm thinking about, I tend to think that our real world is actually imbued with a lot of magic. But I think magic is just natural creative creation, really. It's a manifestation or transformation of things. And quite often, it's the unexplainable in the everyday. It's those coincidences that happen that make us consider, maybe there's something more going on behind the scenes. And yeah, so I think magic is really the unexplainable. It's those cool little moments of like, wow, wasn't that unusual that I was just thinking about that and that popped up, or that happened, or yeah, it's just those little miracles all around us. So it's not really a definition, but that's how I kind of see magic in the world. Yeah.
And you are not the only one who has given that sort of definition of magic. It's really interesting to hear everyone's different definitions, but also very similar. If you could have a magical power or ability, what would it be and why?
Yeah, so this is like a no-brainer for me. I have always wanted the magical power to fly. And I'm not great with heights, so it's completely ridiculous. But I have a lot of dreams where I'm flying, and they're always the most magical feeling dreams, and you get this bird's eye view of the world, and you're kind of in that place between the earth and the heavens, and your problems drop away because you're not right there in them. And I just think that the ability to be able to fly would just be the coolest thing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be fun too. Would have to figure out a way to get over that heights thing.
Yeah.
But maybe because you could control it, I think for me that's a major factor. So
Yeah.
what is your favorite way to get cozy with a book?
Oh, this is so cliche, but honestly, there is nothing better than being like the weather's got to cooperate here. So I would say the weather has to be, it's going to be overcast outside. There's got to be some moody clouds, maybe some background white noise of rain or thunder. There's got to be that whole kind of atmosphere thing set. And then it has got to be on the sofa under a blanket, all cozy with a cat or two or three or four. I've got 4 cats. So, you know, yeah, cats anyway, always with some chocolate. Got to have some chocolate.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and then the other thing for me would be the perfect setting to get cozy with a book has also got to be, I have to know that there is no deadlines or obligations or anything waiting for me anytime soon. So, so that my brain's not thinking ahead to, oh, I've got to stop soon. I got to go do this, or, just that freedom of time to get lost into the world and into another author's world. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds fabulous. I 100% agree with if the weather could be gloomier and
Yeah.
moodier here in the desert, it would be so
Yeah.
much nicer. So speaking of reading, is there anything you're reading now? Any book recommendations you'd like to give our listeners?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I am a bit of a slow reader, but that is usually because I have several books on the go at once. So I tend to dabble in, a few. Well, I read a lot of different genres in that, but I can give you a couple that I have on the go at the moment. And what I would recommend is paranormal cozy mystery. So at the moment, I'm only a few chapters in, but really enjoying Stephen King's book Fairy Tale. Which, have you read that?
I am still trying to get through it. It's my very
Okay.
first Stephen King I've ever
Yeah.
picked up to read, and
Yeah.
it is dense. And I have it
Yeah.
on audio and a paperback, and I got through a lot of it last summer, and I'm just like really trying. I love the
Yeah.
story. It's just a lot of reading, and
Yeah. It's
I
a
have to
fat
really
book
be,
too.
yeah, and you have
Yeah.
to kind of be ready to sit with it for a while. It's not like you
Yes.
can read a chapter and move it along. I mean, I understand. Stephen King always scared me as a child, so I never picked up his books ever.
Mm.
And so I understand now the depth of his writing and what makes him so great, but also I don't have enough time to get through his
Yes.
book. But
Yes.
I'm in the process of trying to finish it.
Yeah. So I'm a bit like that too. I'm really enjoying the story, but it's not a page turner where I have to get to the end.
Yeah.
It's I'll read a little bit now and then I'll come back to it and come back to it. But it's really well written, and I like I said, I'm not that far through, and it's a really fat book, and I'm busy life in that I don't always have the luxury of reading, which sounds horrible when you're an author as well. But yeah, but I'm enjoying that. For anybody that's listening to this that is an author or writer or an aspiring author, I am presently reading Sustain Your Author Career by Claire Taylor. Love her books. She talks about the author life and the Enneagram. So the Enneagram is like your personality traits and goes into how you can best use those to create your best author life and write your best books and connect with the audience that will want to read your books and all that. So I highly recommend her books if you're wanting to write in that. And then on the paranormal cozy front, one of my favorite go-to authors is Angie Fox, who writes the Southern Ghost Hunter mystery series. And so she has, I think it's set again in one of the southern states in the US. And Verity is the main character, a southern girl, quite innocent and everything. She has a pet skunk called Lucy, and unfortunately has pretty much attached to her or her house a bit of a feisty gangster ghost called Frankie. But through him, she's able to see ghosts, and there's always a lot of mysteries in that to be solved in the small town that she will often need to get her cranky ghost friend Frankie to help her with. And yeah, and you've got all the good stuff of, that love interest and everything. But I think I'm reading book 13 at the moment. So she has quite a significant series with them. And yeah, I just highly recommend them. I just find them such fun reads. So
That
yeah.
that when you were describing the book, it sounded very familiar. So I wonder if I have book one or something
Yeah.
on a TBR somewhere.
Yeah.
I'll definitely have to push that up to the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that does sound like a really great, and I love a good long series that'll take time to get
Yeah.
through. For sure.
Exactly. So yeah, I just find them really fun. You know, they've got all that. There's the quirkiness, the humor, the mystery solving, the love interest. You know, it hits all the and then there's ghosts, and I'm quite like my ghost stories. So
Yeah,
yay,
yeah.
yeah.
So, do you have any new projects that you would like to share or promote?
So at the moment, I'm in the process of just finishing up and getting ready to publish one of my gothic suspense novels that's been hanging around for quite a while. It's been a bit of a busy year, so it's definitely been a slow year this year for me for writing and publishing and whatnot. But I am already starting to brainstorm and pull together the threads of the next Hades story. And then I really foresee the next the next year or so, I'd like to say really focusing in on this series. And like I said, I can see it being more than a trilogy. So I'd like to really put that effort in. And yeah, so I am hoping that the second book in the Hades series, it's going to be called Hades Hex, and that I am hoping will be out hopefully in the first half of next year, and then maybe that will be followed by the third book, which will be Hades Hocus Pocus. So
Love it.
so that's on the agenda. So of course, I always have the best intentions, but so at the moment it's just a gothic suspense that I'm getting out into the world that I'm excited for, and then I want to just really spend some time going all in on the paranormal cozy mysteries. So
Oh, that's exciting. I'm excited. Yay. And how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is just jobuer.com. So JOBUER.com. And all my books are on there. My books are available on all the major platforms, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, all of them really. And on my website, on the front page, even you can join my newsletter. If you like gothic suspense and things that are a little bit darker than paranormal cozies, you can get a free collection of short stories by signing up to my newsletter. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, primarily Instagram, and that's just Jo Buer Author. So I'm pretty easy to find there. If you're an author and you're interested in the craft and that, I also have a podcast called Alchemy for Authors, which is about manifestation and mindset for authors. And I interview a lot of authors about craft and marketing and publishing and all that lovely stuff too. And that's also on my website, but also like you can listen to anywhere that you listen to podcasts. So yeah, quick Google and you'll probably find me.
Yeah, she's pretty easy to
Yep.
find. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I can't wait for the next book in the series.
It's been such a joy, and I'll make sure to keep you updated when Hades Hex comes out too. I'll send you a copy. So
Yes,
yay.
definitely. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.